ta, te, ti, suerte, para mí, si no fuera para mí, será para ti, ta, te, ti. Provincia Seguros. Vamos a estar ahí cuando más nos necesites.
This was the genesis of the stage, rock stage, as a dramatic event. Before that, you had your stage lights, a follow spot, people got up there, performed their material, sometimes waved their arms a little bit, but there was no drama. The Doors brought drama.
In the 60s, at the time, there was an interesting sort of theatrical style. It had come out of the theater of the absurd, which was a very funny, humorous, theatrical movement in the 50s, and it turned into a kind of a confrontational theater. And Morrison picked up a great deal of his way of confronting the audience from Julian Beck and the Living Theater.
If one can make the spectator really feel some pain objectively in a public ceremony, it may open the door to further feeling. That may be the route through which we can again find our feelings.
Morrison took Julian Beck's message to heart and created his persona of the threatening Lizard King, prepared to do anything on stage to provoke an audience out of what he saw as their apathy.
When the music's over, turn up the light, turn up the light, turn up the light.
It had gotten to the point where Jim realized that he had an enormous power, not just the power to move people emotionally, but to move them politically. Not so much in the politic of the time. That's not what he was interested in. He was more interested in the politic of the insane.
All right for you, baby.
He started playing with that on stage to see, what can I do to this audience? Can I whip it to hysteria? Can I whip it to insanity? Can I activate the madness of crowds to my ends? And he got pretty good at it.
You're all a bunch of fucking idiots!
Interestingly, that Jim had gone to 6 performances in a row of Julian Beck's Living Theater in Los Angeles about a week or two before the Miami concert took place. And they had taken their clothes off on stage. I'm not allowed to walk naked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all kinds of things. Jim was going to do the same thing in Miami.
Come up here and love my ass. Come on. Yeah. I love you.
As president of the Greater Miami Crime Commission, I'm calling upon the Dade County Grand Jury and the State Attorney's Office to immediately take criminal action against those that were responsible for the deplorable condition and situation when the group known as the Doors attempted to precipitate a riot.
We have taken out 2 warrants for Jim Morrison
One of them is for indecent exposure.
In the trial, there are 250 photographs entered, a stack of photographs this high at the trial. Photos of everything that was going on at the concert. Not one photo of the ivory shaft appeared. So I doubt if it happened, but I think it was a mass hallucination. I think it was something like the vision of Lourdes or something like that, is what happened in Miami.
The Miami concert was to mark the effective end of the Doors' career as a live band. Promoters across the country canceled their bookings. Not long afterwards, Morrison was found dead in his hotel bedroom in Paris. Another performer was to emerge from the Midwest of America, near Detroit, to take over Morrison's mantle and wear the leather trousers.
Walk across the USA.
He too would challenge the audience in an extreme and physical way.
Not a year with nothing to do.
I think what was cool about where I grew up was that there was so much wild space around it. I used to spend most of my time, my free time every day, I would go out in the corn and make up games. I grew up in a mobile home, actually a series of them. The one when I was little was in a mobile home court of about 100 trailers. And I think the solitude and time, the Midwestern, where I was, gave me an ability to concentrate and to imagine. That would make me able to do the job later when it came up. I dropped out of college and went to try to play the blues because I liked this kind of music. And it didn't take me long to figure out that, you know, I wasn't middle-aged, I wasn't black, and I wasn't from Mississippi. But how about if I could take those ideas, but do that from the point of view of our life back in Michigan?
Since we broke away for our message, Iggy has been in the crowd and out again 3 different times. They seem to be enjoying it, and so does he.
Get all right! Get all right!
We seem to have lost him, and we're trying to get a light on him now.
The Doors were very key for us. I would listen a lot to what he was doing, and the Velvet Underground were very, very, very avant and very key for us at the time. But still, it was mainly about clang bang, clang 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 bang bang bang, loud loud and annoying. And the more annoying it was, the better. And then the added element was to find something monolithic, simple, metallic, just like a big machine. And the way I got into that was because you'd go to the Ford plant, you'd watch the drill press, and that's such a great sound. And each one is another fender, you know. And it was just, I thought, God, those are impressive sounds, big sounds, and they're so regular and simple. I thought, those are sounds that even we could master. At first, we'd just have any old riff that was okay, and we'd go along and play it for a while, and I'd sing whatever came into my head, and I would change the song every month. And I would act it out and dance around, and I was taking my feeling and my dances from a combination of the things I felt when I was walking around on drugs, the things that I saw American Indians do, and also dances that I'd seen done in Chicago at the blues bars. You had rowdy elements in the audiences in Michigan, and also you had kind of resistant elements. And so I started mixing it up with the crowd, and if they wouldn't give me what I wanted, I would go out and take the show to them.
No fun, my babe. No fun.
All sorts of things started happening. Sometimes I would, just for the fun of it, I'd do what little kids do when they want to get attention, which is just stand really still and then pretend I was falling on the floor, except I'd do it falling off a stage and fall on top of somebody. Sometimes I'd lose my clothes. I got busted for that a couple times. Other times I'd get nicked up myself. Maybe I'd nick myself with a drumstick or something if I was nervous or uncomfortable. Different things would happen. There was a big period when I got into this routine of I would go out and just find the prettiest girl in the crowd and seize her, because it was a great way to meet girls, basically, you know. I mean, hey, I've got a band, I'm in town, let's get something out of this. I'm not getting paid that much, right?
Ámbito Financiero presenta Cocina Internacional. Toda la cocina país por país en su kiosco. 12 tomos con recetas paso a paso y fotografías espectaculares para aprender a cocinar de todo. Cada miércoles en su kiosco con Ámbito Financiero. Resérvelo. Clásicos del cine, para revivir momentos inolvidables frente a la pantalla. Clásicos del cine, todas las tardes, de lunes a viernes a las 14, por Canal 7 Argentina.
Con todo esto era el vértigo de las relaciones, que te hacen, qué sé yo, te llaman, te mandan cartas, flores, no sé, es de loco, pero bueno, uno se va enganchando y bueno, ahí estoy.
Andrea, señora, se llama Andrea.
Sí, bueno, no, da lo mismo, da lo mismo. Las cosas cambiaron ahora, ¿eh?
¿Y cómo cambiaron?
Este martes, viva otro apasionante capítulo de Un Cortado, Historias de Café, a las 22 horas, por Canal 7 Argentina. El turismo en la Argentina. Todos los martes y viernes en Ámbito Nacional del diario mejor informado del país.
Started getting a big following, mostly disaffected high school kids, unemployed people, or mentally deranged people, people that come back to Vietnam always like this.
That's peanut butter.
Although Iggy gained a cult reputation, the Stooges' career as a band was dogged by increasing problems with drugs, and their first album, produced by the Velvet Underground's John Cale, sold pitifully. Another performer from Detroit was also, like Iggy, doing things a little differently.
Lines form on my left and right, lines form on my face and hands. I'm in the middle without any plans. I'm a boy and I'm a man. I'm 18.
I'm a boy and I'm a man. I'm 18 and I don't know what I want.
To us, it was a combination of comic books, every RKO horror movie we'd ever seen. We were total students of trivial television. We never read anything that wasn't a cheap novel, you know. I mean, we were really the epitome of the American cultureless society. And all we did was we invented this Frankenstein named Alice Cooper that was really a reflection of that.
I gotta get out of the place. I gotta run it.
I think the idea of insulting middle America by changing your name to Alice Cooper and wearing women's clothes and everybody in the band being dead straight, and instead of being dopers, everybody drank beer. We were all American. We were every bit all American. And all we did was we took all the taboos and just put them on the table.
What does it take?
played the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival. There was about 80,000 people outdoors, and nobody had ever heard of us.
Give me a break, yeah.
And we did our normal set. But at the end of our show, we always used to take a pillow, and we'd open it up, and we had CO2 cartridges, and we would blow these feathers all over the audience. And one pillow will pretty much cover Madison Square Garden. And we had about 3 or 4 pillows that night. And all the feathers were going, and somebody from the audience threw a chicken on stage. And I picked it up, I figured it's a bird. I'm from Detroit, I don't know. Chicken's got wings, it'll fly. And I threw it back in the audience, figuring it would just fly away. Well, it went into the audience, and the audience tore it to pieces. I always say that we were the dagger in the heart of the love generation. We were like the stake right through the heart, because we were right at the end of peace and love, and all of a sudden here was this shiny, new, horrible monster that was really fun to watch.
The most extreme image of the rock star as glittery creature from another planet came not from America, but Britain.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Among a number of films that made a deep impression upon me in the 60s, I think one of the most important at the very end was 2001, Stanley Kubrick. It was the sense of isolation that I related to. That, in combination with a number of other elements, set the pattern for a lot of the kinds of music that I wrote and the kind of performances that I gave, and probably predicted my lifestyle for the 70s.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirt you wear.
I was talking with a friend of mine not so long ago who also came from suburbia. And you're given the impression that nothing culturally belongs to you, that you are sort of in this wasteland. And I think there's a passion for most people to have an iota of sort of curiosity about them to escape and get out and try and find who one is and find some kinds of roots, and both of us got out for the same reasons. Exactly that, a desperation and exhaustion with the blandness of where we grew up.
David Jones became David Bowie and trained in theatre and mime before starting to do a series of mainly folk-based albums. Apart from the early success of Space Oddity in 1969, his record sold very poorly, until his wife Angie suggested a bold publicity move.
I knew I had a job in there somewhere, and it was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it, and I was the man for it. Or rather, I was the androgyne for it.
Oh, you pretty things, don't you know?
Bowie was the first rock star to proclaim publicly that he was bisexual or gay. He had already posed for the cover of one album, The Man Who Sold the World, in a dress, although this album cover was changed by the record company for its US release to an image that was thought to be more acceptable to the American market.
Say it again, you gotta make way for the Homo superior.
On his first visit to New York, Bowie met Andy Warhol, and he was to draw considerable inspiration from a group of actors associated with the factory.
Will somebody wait for me? Sugar sweet, so easy.
When I was doing Andy Warhol's Pork in New York, they said Pork was nothing but a bunch of naked freaks running around on stage doing perverted acts, We were going, yeah, come see the show. Anyway, when Bowie and Angela came to see Pork, and she started to meet all the cast of Pork, people were dyeing their hair purple and green. Lee was coloring his hair with magic markers. We wore our fingernail polish out in the clubs. We wore our fingernail polish on the street. We dressed, just as crazy on the street as we did on stage. Angie began to push David in that direction. Without any of that, David would have just continued having long, floppy hair and singing folk songs.
Well, I'm up on the 11th floor and I'm watching the cruisers below.
It was not only the Warhol look that had begun to influence Bowie, it was the New York sound as well.
Velvet Underground became very important to me. There was this sort of mixture of rock and avant-garde, Cale's influence of avant-garde, and Lou Reed's very fine pop tunesmithism. He was a very fine pop writer, and the combination was so brutal.
While in New York, Bowie got to know Lou Reed, as well as the irrepressible Iggy Pop, who, in imitation of some of the Warhol superstars, had started to cover himself with glitter on stage.
To me, they represented the wild side of existentialist America. And of course, being a sort of a real nutcase about America and American music, that was everything that I thought we should have in England. I didn't know if we had it in England or not. So at that time, one was borrowing heavily from the American influence. But of course, being filtered through this British system, it came out in more vaudeville, more Robert Smith than MC5.
The result was Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy play guitar, jamming gun with weird and killer, and the spiders.
Ziggy was unveiled to the British public in 1972 in a series of, at first, small concerts. Finally, Bowie had found the combination that was going to work.
Special man, and then we were Ziggy's band.
Ziggy kind of exploded overnight. I think that Ziggy Stardust, David had been working on one way or another for a long time. And it was his sort of alien being, his first of all, Ziggy was an alien being. He was like the stranger that we all feel that we are, except he was very beautiful and very seductive, and people wanted to touch Ziggy. David had been experimenting with a lot of looks, a lot of sounds, a lot of styles. None of them had quite clicked until Ziggy. And I think it was really once he got that haircut.
Now Ziggy played guitar. I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill.
No llega esto. En internet, ámbitoweb.com.
Los Nocheros.
Diciendo siempre que no, solita te quedarás, porque esta deuda de amor un día vas a pagar.
Están en la primera gran noche de la 17ª Fiesta Nacional de la Artesanía. Este jueves a las 22, desde Colón, Entre Ríos, por Canal 7 Argentina, para todo el país.
Sé que te mueres por mí, aunque me digas que no, no quiero yo presumir, pero sospecho que vos has aprendido a mentir cuando me dices que no.
Estás en Canal 7. Cambiar. Valió la pena. Nos estamos viendo. Si este es su ámbito, esta es su web. Ámbitoweb.com, el sitio más completo de la Argentina.
They said he was coming round the back. I've been waiting for ages to see him. 9 o'clock.
Why are you so upset?
He's smashing.
You're
right.
David Bowie's wife, right?
Yes, I am.
What's it like with all these girls loving your husband so much?
Absolutely fabulous. Wouldn't you love to be loved by so many?
Britain had seen nothing like it for years. Ziggy fever took over. A key element of Bowie's chart success in Britain was the hard, muscular sound of his guitar player. Mick Ronson could also supply a reflective style of playing that gave the Ziggy character a real depth and range.
When I first heard him play, I thought, oh, that's my Jeff Beck. He is fantastic. This kid is great. And so I sort of hoodwinked him into working. I didn't quite actually have to tell him in the beginning that we'd have to wear makeup and all that. Because Mick came from Hull, you know, was very down to earth, as was the rest of the Spider, you know. Look, what do you mean, makeup? I said, well, you know, right, so. And so I reverted to things like, you looked very green tonight on stage. I think if you wore makeup, you'd probably look a little more natural looking. And sort of lies like this. And gradually got them into sort of, you know, areas of costume and theatre. And actually, when they realized how many girls they could pull when they looked so sort of otherworldly, they took to it like a fish to water.
For me, when I was on stage, I was kind of doing what I had to do, you know. I mean, just as I guess what I felt I had to do, but I felt like the way I played, you know. I think a lot of people saw it as a very good sort of counterfoil between me and David, because David would be more delicate and a little more woman-like. And I was kind of like stomping along on the side there, a bit more like a, I can't really say bricklayer, but that's kind of what I mean, you know. I'm very much a character when I go on stage, I feel. I mean, I...
Like an actor?
Yeah, I believe in my part all the way down the line, right the way down. But I do play it for all it's worth, because that's the way I do my stage thing. That's part of what Bowie's supposedly all about. I'm an actor.
The chief ingredients were to de-violence the look of Plot Lacorin. Evoke the mystery of kabuki and no theatre. But if you'd asked me at the time what it was I was trying to do, I had simply no idea. All I knew, it was, and I sound like a parrot saying this, but it's true, and this otherness, this other world, an alternative reality, one that I really wanted to embrace. I wanted anything but the place that I came from.
Bowie started to rely heavily on his manager, Tony DeFries, who surrounded him with all the apparatus and expense of a major star, regardless of the fact that there wasn't always the money to pay for it.
Tony DeFries had this idea that if we just told the world that I was super huge and then treated me as though I were, then something might happen.
In Britain, the strategy worked perfectly, and Bowie's albums sold extremely well. But in America, the real prize market, it was a different story. RCA Records in the States were looking for someone to bolster up their company roster, which had for years relied heavily on Elvis. DeFries sold Bowie to them, saying that Bowie would be a new queen of rock and roll to replace the king. But it soon became clear that a mainstream American audience was not yet ready for a rock star from outer space with a penchant for cross-dressing, and Ziggy made no impact on the US charts at all.
The whole glam thing, like, was kind of great for me when I met Bowie, and he was into that, and so I got into that. It was something that I had already seen with Warhol, but I hadn't done that then. So the 70s was like a chance for me to get in on it. I mean, that was one of the great things. You could, and I learned that from Andy. You could be anything.
When Bowie met Lou Reed this time round in New York, Reed was at a low point in his solo career after leaving the Velvet Underground.
David Bowie produced your last 2 albums?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Just 1 album?
1.
What was it like working with him?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. But when he gets drunk, he thinks he's Ziggy.
Working with Bowie, Lou Reed was to draw again on the people who had inspired him in the first place, the hookers, junkies, and cross-dressers of New York street life.
Holly came from Miami, FLA, hitchhiked away across USA, plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, and then he was a she. She says, hey, babe, take a walk on the wild side. Said, hey, honey, take a walk on the wild side.
Walk on the Wild Side had been banned from the BBC, as it was banned in the United States. What kind of repressive culture would ban a song?
Candy came from out on the island. In the back room, she was everybody's darling.
There were versions in the United States that were only 14 seconds long. Just go bleep, 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 do, 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 bleep, bleep, bleep.
Said, hey, babe, take a walk on the wild side. And the colored girls go do, 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 do.
Again, that desire to stir things up and move them a bit was there.
Ladies and gentlemen, straight from his fantastically successful Glam Rock.
Back in Britain, Bowie's fame continued to grow, and a sellout tour of the country ended unexpectedly when he gave a final concert at the Hammersmith Odeon.
The last concert, I mean, that whole tour of England, we did a whole tour of England before we did this concert. This last night, it was a great last night too. There was a lot of energy there. It was kind of pretty sad in some ways too, you know, because it was the end of that period, you know.
By now, Bowie's success had inspired a whole range of other bands in Britain.
Girl on the run around, got me all around town. Got me, girl on the run around.
A new movement had been born, dubbed, inelegantly, Glam Rock. Not since the days of Little Richard had the chart seen so much flamboyant showbiz glitter.
I said, Mama, we're all crazy now.
From stardust to Baco foil, you could wear anything, so long as it wasn't denim. Even hardened old veterans like the Stones recognized a market force when it was happening.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you. Bye-bye, we love you.
So given the success of glam, many in Britain could not understand when Bowie decided to retire Ziggy at the height of his fame. But Bowie was ready to experiment with something new, and for another assault on America.
Diamond Dogs by Bowie. Available on RCA records and tapes worldwide. Diamond Dogs by Bowie, a Main Man production.
How many more years till I have to let you dog me around?
En la ciudad de Buenos Aires, la temperatura actual es de 25 grados, con una humedad relativa del 78% y una presión atmosférica de 1.200 milibares.
Ámbitoweb.com. Opinan los que saben. Gracias, Broadcasting, por hacernos por segundo año consecutivo el canal más nominado de la televisión argentina. Gracias por elegir el esfuerzo, el trabajo y el pluralismo. Gracias por elegir al canal público. Canal 7 Argentina, el canal con más nominaciones al Premio Broadcasting 2001. Estás en Canal 7. Cambiar valió la pena. Nos estamos viendo.
¿Qué tal será?
Título, calificación y reseña del contenido de todas las películas de los últimos años. Solo en ámbitoweb.com.
For his Diamond Dogs tour of 1974, which took him right across the States, he reworked his old songs and image. Out went the makeup and stockings. In came nicely cut soul boy suits.
Actually getting to the land of my dreams, as it was then, it was a real discovery for me, and I guess I started soaking up even more American influences, but first-hand this time.
There you go, classic Gene Genie riff. Comes from basically the Muddy Waters and the Anna Man, John Lee Hooker.
I started writing songs city by city. The one that I immediately remember, of course, is Gene Genie. It was definitely out of Detroit and focused around Iggy, an Iggy-type character, to be fully fair. It wasn't actually Iggy. But I wanted some more musical texture to go into it. And again, jazz was kind of rearing its head. And the juxtaposition of somebody who was right out of left field jazz, working with what we were doing, which was fairly conventional rock and roll, was really kind of interesting.
When I played the tune Time during the Diamond Dogs tour, it was a very theatrical tour, and the band was actually in the pit. It was very much like taking a musical Broadway on the road, a show on the road. And it had a 1920s and 30s setting feel, and I played like a swing-style piano, stride music it was called, in fact, with avant-garde touching. So you'll hear it was something like this.
Waiting in the wings, he speaks of senseless things. His script is you and me. Boy.
The new ingredient that really started to help sell Bowie on his return to America was his revolutionary use of a full stage set. Bands had used light shows before, but this was the first time a rock star had gone to a team of Broadway designers.
There were 4 towers that were
the basis of the design, and they were made of newsprint that could be torn apart. So Bowie actually climbed one of these towers and destroyed the building during the concert. There was also a bridge across here, and during the concert, the bridge lowered down to the stage so that he could step off of it and sing downstage. And then at the end, it raised up again. And a cherry picker arm.
Ground control to Major Tom.
There was a door that opened up, and this cherry picker arm came forward
Commencing countdown, engines on.
and extended out over the first 6 rows of the audience.
Check ignition and may God's love be with you.
The first time a cherry picker, I think, subsequently used by many others, was used in rock and roll, it was standing upright like that with an office chair on the top, and it was set in the window of a skyscraper, and I was sitting on the office chair on a telephone like some kind of male secretary. And the cherry picker started coming out, and it went out about 40 foot over the audience's heads. And because of the beautiful lighting that we had, you didn't see the rest of the cherry picker. You only saw the office chair suspended out there. At the end of the song finished, I put the telephone back in its cradle. The bloody thing didn't go back. So I was just stuck out there. What am I going to do here? And the next song started, and so I think I did 3 or 4 songs. On this chair, I thought, what am I going to do when the show finishes? I can't go anywhere. I'm going to have to jump. They'd better catch me. I thought, no, Iggy's already done that.
The press loved it, and the tour sold out in increasingly larger venues.
I've seen all the rest of my Hollywood heights, best of the last, be a star they ever had. Step on my legend, boom said I'd be. Get that out 50, 'cause you just got me.
I guess I'm living my fantasy.
What's your fantasy?
Oh, Bowie. He represents it all to me. Excitement, space. See, I'm just the space cadet. He's the commander.
You're so bad. Best I ever had. Oh, please,
I think eventually David Bowie had to change the androgyny, draggy, bisexual creature, as all those little American boys used to say, you know, fad music. He had to change because America just was not ready to completely let that come into the mainstream. Even Alice Cooper had to stop doing drag. Alice Cooper had to stop wearing ladies' slingback shoes. He had to stop wearing the false eyelashes and the women's old dresses and go more into the horror. People in America could understand horror and blood and dead babies, but they couldn't understand male-female sexuality, you know, bisexuality. They weren't ready to understand.
Alice had indeed got into horror. He too had begun to develop a bigger stage show.
Into my nightmare, I think you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna feel like.
It got to a point where we were drawing enough people where we could see, well, we could do a football stadium. We could go ahead and do a football. But in order to fill that kind of a stadium, we had to do a bigger show. And we had the means to do it. We actually had the money to do it, so we did.
There were good commercial reasons for bringing theatre into rock music. The economics of touring meant the closure of many of the old medium-sized venues and a need to fill huge stadiums. The music alone was clearly not always going to be enough to do this. One band from New York City took it all to the logical extreme. On the back of their pyrotechnic stage show, Kiss were to sell more records than Bowie, Alice Cooper, and Lou Reed put together.
When we were growing up, I imagine
There were many people who were drawing pictures of the race car that they wanted to own someday. I think we probably were different in that during school, we were probably drawing pictures of what the ultimate stage would look like for a rock and roll show. The difference was we reached a point where we would take that drawing to somebody and say, build this.
This is the model of the KISS Destroyer Tour in 1976. One of the main elements here was to bring them up and over the amps and down these stage steps left and right, and so that they had energy that could attack the stage. One of the main elements in most of their staging is their KISS logo. It wasn't designed by us, it really came from them.
KISS logo was really interesting because the logo that appears on everything to this day, I drew. I drew it in my parents' living room, freehand with a ruler, but without measuring. So I did it for a poster for a dance we were doing in New York City. And if you look on your album covers to this day, the two S's at the bottom are not perfectly parallel because I did it without measuring. As far as the makeup went, let's face it, when you play someplace like this, you better make sure you can be seen by the last row. You want to know that somebody down there doesn't look on the stage and go, is that an ant? Or is that Paul? Is that Gene?
El turismo en la Argentina. Todos los martes y viernes en Ámbito Nacional del diario mejor informado del país.
Este jueves, en Hora Infinito.
Un poeta y pintor conocido como el Nostradamus argentino realizó increíbles vaticinios que se cumplieron rigurosamente.
Benjamín Solari Parravicini, el misterio de sus inquietantes revelaciones, en una impactante producción original realizada por la Señal Infinito. Jueves, 21 horas, por Canal 7. Estás en Canal 7. Cambiar valió la pena. Nos estamos viendo.
Ámbito Financiero presenta Cocina Internacional. Toda la cocina país por país en su kiosco. 12 tomos con recetas paso a paso y fotografías espectaculares para aprender a cocinar de todo. Cada miércoles en su kiosco con Ámbito Financiero. Resérvelo.
It was a sentiment that would be shared by many in the business. If you wanted to be big, your set had to be big as well. Without enough juggernauts to transport a circus, no rock band was really in business. Indeed, the whole industry was beginning to change. When artist Guy Pilar painted these fantasy portraits in 1974, he showed his rock stars living in an increasingly showbiz world of cabaret and limousines.
There's an underlying unease.
Meanwhile, Bowie himself was in trouble. Despite the success of Diamond Dogs, De Vries's heavy spending on it had finally bankrupted Main Man, and Bowie had developed an increasingly heavy cocaine habit while living in Los Angeles.
We're not stopped. Is there anything behind us?
I think I thought of David Bowie, but I first was trying to figure out who would be Mr. Newton. Someone who was inside society and yet awkward in it. Like, I don't know how to explain that, but awkward in it. Someone that would find themselves, someone who is at odds with society.
A new suit came in. It's not your color, it's blue.
During the making of the film, David got more than into the character of Mr. Newton. I think he put much more of himself and we'd also been able to get into the scripts.
I don't want to talk to anyone.
It was linked very much to his ideas in his music. And towards the end, I realized a big change had happened in his life.
Honey, what's happened to you?
What's happened to me?
Nick Rowe does say that I took some of the character of Newton away with me from The Man Who Fell to Earth. The thing that I objectively remember taking with me was the wardrobe. I literally walked off with the clothes. And I used the same clothes on the Station to Station tour.
Bowie went back to basics. No set, no frills, and a series of albums that saw him moving to a more sparse electronic sound. He also made a surprising move away from America.
Well, I've got personal reasons for going to Berlin were really to get me out of Los Angeles, which at the time I knew nobody but bad people, and I was doing nothing but bad stuff.
In fact, Berlin was in many ways the perfect place for Bowie. It had been almost a spiritual home for this whole movement of rock and roll. Lou Reed recorded an album called Berlin without having been there. The Doors covered Kurt Weill songs. And now Bowie was to be joined there by another survivor of the era.
Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies und gentlemen.
Iggy Pop had also been managed by Tony DeFries, and it had ended in tears. He too needed a change.
I'd always been fascinated with the Germans. A lot of guys in rock and roll like the uniform, you know. And I went there with Bowie, and basically we just dug the whole idea that this was Berlin. This is a war zone. This is no man's land. And I had this book of Jim Morrison poetry, and one of the poems in it was about modern life as a journey by car.
I am the passenger, and I ride and I ride. I ride through the city sides. I see the stars come out of the sky. Yeah, the ride in a hollow sky. You know, it looks so good tonight.
Heroes and Lust for Life were both pure German products. The studio where those were made had a gun turret, lookout post for the guys who would watch to try to keep people in the East, straight out the window of the control booth, and sometimes they'd wave to us. It's a hell of an atmosphere.
Absolute Ruhe, bitte.
The studio, Hansa by the Wall, was a very wise choice. There was no mistaking the sound. We had a feeling on tape immediately.
I wish I could swim.
And I carry that sound throughout every overdub. There's a kind of a clanging metallic sound, which is David or I hitting a big metal ashtray.
Though nothing will keep us together.
We had a microphone about the customary 9 inches from his face. Then we had another microphone about 20 feet from himself. And then we had another microphone about 50 feet. And we put these things called gates, an electronic gate on each microphone, so that when he was singing, like, very quietly, like, you could be me and all that, like that, only this microphone was open. It had no gate on it. If he sang a little louder, the next microphone would open up with the gate, and that would make sort of this big splash of reverb. And then if he really sang loud, the back microphone would open up, and it would just open up this enormous sound.
Precursors was in many ways a pivotal song in the history of rock and roll. It looked forward to the simpler, more direct sounds that punk and the electronic music of the 80s would follow. But it was also an epitaph for an era when rock stars had acted out extreme roles in an attempt to confront themselves and their audiences with who they really were, when, on stage at least, they could be heroes just for one day.
Miami Crime Commission, I'm calling upon the Dade County Grand Jury and the State Attorney's Office to immediately take criminal action against those that were responsible for the deplorable condition and situation when the group known as the Doors attempted to precipitate a riot.
We have taken out 2 warrants for Jim Morrison. One of them is for indecent exposure.
In the trial, there are 250 photographs entered, a stack of photographs this high at the trial. Photos of everything that was going on at the concert. Not one photo of the ivory shaft appeared. So I doubt if it happened, but I think it was a mass hallucination. I think it was something like the vision of Lourdes or something like that, is what happened in Miami.
The Miami concert was to mark the effective end of the Doors' career as a live band. Promoters across the country canceled their bookings. Not long afterwards, Morrison was found dead in his hotel bedroom in Paris. Another performer was to emerge from the Midwest of America, near Detroit, to take over Morrison's mantle and wear the leather trousers.
Walk across the USA.
He too would challenge the audience in an extreme and physical way.
None of you with nothing to do.
I think what was cool about where I grew up was that there was so much wild space around it. I used to spend most of my time, my free time every day, I would go out in the corn and make up games. I grew up in a mobile home, actually a series of them. The one when I was little was in a mobile home court of about 100 trailers. And I think the solitude and time, the Midwestern, where I was, gave me an ability to concentrate and to imagine. That would make me able to do the job later when it came up. I dropped out of college and went to try to play the blues because I liked this kind of music. And it didn't take me long to figure out that, you know, I wasn't middle-aged, I wasn't black, and I wasn't from Mississippi. But how about if I could take those ideas, but do that from the point of view of our life back in Michigan?
Since we broke away for our message, Iggy has been in the crowd and out again 3 different times. They seem to be enjoying it, and so does he.
Get all right! Get all right!
We seem to have lost him, and we're trying to get a light on him now.
The Doors were very key for us. I would listen a lot to what he was doing, and the Velvet Underground were very, very, very avant and very key for us at the time. But still, it was mainly about.
When the music's over, turn up the light, turn up the light, turn up the light.
It had gotten to the point where Jim realized that he had an enormous power. Not just the power to move people emotionally, but to move them politically. And not so much in the politic of the time. That's not what he was interested in. He was more interested in the politic of the insane.
All right for you, baby.
He started playing with that on stage to see, what can I do to this audience? Can I whip it to hysteria? Can I whip it to insanity? can I activate the madness of crowds to my ends? And he got pretty good at it.
You're all a bunch of fucking idiots!
Interestingly, that Jim had gone to 6 performances in a row of Julian Beck's Living Theater in Los Angeles about a week or 2 before the Miami concert took place. And they had taken their clothes off on stage. I'm not allowed to walk naked, et cetera, all kinds of things. Jim was going to do the same thing in Miami.
Come up here and love my ass. Come on. Yeah. I love you.
As president of the great...
This was the genesis of the stage, rock stage, as a dramatic event. Before that, you had your stage lights, a follow spot, people got up there, performed their material, sometimes waved their arms a little bit, but there was no drama. The Doors brought drama.
In the 60s, at the time, there was an interesting sort of theatrical style. It had come out of the theater of the absurd, which was a very funny, humorous, theatrical movement in the 50s, and had turned into a kind of a confrontational theater. And Morrison picked up a great deal of his way of confronting the audience from Julian Beck and the Living Theater.
If one can make the spectator really feel some pain objectively in a public ceremony, it may open the door to further feeling. That may be the route through which we can again find our feelings.
Morrison took Julian Beck's message to heart and created his persona of the threatening Lizard King, prepared to do anything on stage to provoke an audience out of what he saw as their apathy.
Ta, te, ti, suerte, para, mi, sino, fuera, para, mi, sera, para, ti, ta, te, ti. Provincia Seguros. Vamos a estar ahí cuando más nos necesites.